Recorded. There is one change to the agenda, which I apologize for, but I did not catch. The review of the executive session minutes will take place in executive session, and then they will be approved for release in executive session, and then they will be ratified in the session of the commission in September. The release will be ratified in the open session in September. So with that change, is there any objection to the agenda?
No, sir.
Hearing none, it's approved. We have minutes of the meeting of July 11th, 2017. Are there any additions or corrections or changes?
No.
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I should have said that Mr. Buscarin has said he would join us by telephone, but so far he has not. If he does, we will actually have to take roll call votes. But for the moment, we will not. So we have a warrant of July 19th, 2017 to approve, to ratify, and a warrant of August 9, 2017 to approve. Mr. Buscarin, is that you? Hello? Is there a motion to ratify
I'll make that motion.
and approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Pending leases and contracts is set forth on Exhibit 1, which I guess we do not have any of the McFarland Johnson contracts yet to approve, but the others, Mr. Rafter, would you like to go through, please?
Yes. The first is a catering agreement, a new business agreement with Nantucket Long Island Chefs. It's the typical $1,500 business fee plus 25% catering charge. And the next is a contract with Southworth Milton for the purchase of the air compressor, which was in our capital projects and is a state contract purchase.
And Victor Brandon? Yes, it is.
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they're all lit up.
Yes.
They're all lit.
They're all lit.
Oh, maybe.
I can't get any closer.
Next is Victor Brandon for $2,335,990. That's to reconstruct a portion of the north apron, replace 5,000 linear feet of perimeter fence. We have an FAA grant in hand for that, but I want to remind the commission as well that it will require some supplemental appropriation at special town meeting of about $405,000. The FAA grant includes that amount, though.
So what happens if we don't get that extra money, appropriation? Do we cut back on the contract to a smaller area, or?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to work with Brian or talk to him about what would happen there.
But is the contract approval dependent on that
The
appropriation? I mean, what I'm getting at is, do we require
Subject to appropriate funding.
it requires a separate motion then? All right. I will entertain a motion to approve the catering agreement with Nantucket Long Island Chefs and the contract with Southworth Milton, Inc. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions? I'm sorry, I didn't give a chance. Any discussion, any questions on these? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Victor Brandon, I will entertain a motion to approve the contract with Victor Brandon Corp., subject to funding availability.
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
All right. Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to pending matters, and the best news we've had in a long time.
Some very good news. The Army Corps of Engineers has issued the final document, which is in your, it's a handout, approving and allowing us to now move forward with the Bunker Road site clearing the FUD site. So that can come off the agenda and then move forward with the RFP for Bunker Road. And I'd like to thank them. That's coming out a little bit early. They were supposed to have it out in October, so having it in August is good. And you may recall initially that work wasn't scheduled to be done until 2035, so we got that done in advance, didn't we? Any questions on that, or?
No, but it comes off the agenda now, right?
Yes.
Right, it's been on there forever.
Fine. Tony?
Mr. Viscarin, is that you?
Yes.
All right, we're already started. We're into pending matters. Mr. Rafter just reported that the FUDS matter has been resolved, and will no longer see it on the agenda.
Okay.
General fund repayment.
The FAA has requested additional information on this request, and Jamie has prepared response to most of the questions, but she's also working with the town finance department to gather the remainder of the information. And at this point in time, the FAA has determined approximately $650,000 not to be eligible. So unless, of course, there can be documentation proving that they were incurred within the appropriate time periods. So we're working to get that information back to FAA. Next, we have Brookfield Assets LLC, and we're still waiting for the attorneys to finalize some housekeeping items on the agreements between the primary lease and the sublease, and also to synchronize some dates with those agreements.
Any questions? Thank you. Minimum standards?
We're proposing, as you may remember, changes to the minimum standards. I had initially drafted a proposed set of changes to the existing minimum standards regarding freight and cargo, and addressing the operators as well as facilities. We sent them out to the users for comments. We received comments from 3 different groups. Based on feedback, I have modified the request to change them, and that is in your packet as well. Today we received Cape Air input. They initially requested some additional information, but I was just recently forwarded a memo indicating that they would, they're going to, and I believe there's a representative here today, but it's their intent to withdraw from freight service serving the market. So you can see it's a handout, the letter as well as their previous letter with some alternatives and suggestions and thoughts. So the primary change is that all cargo would be required to be processed through an approved facility or through a separate agreement with the airport, and no cargo would be processed or permitted to be processed through the terminal building. And I've been in touch with Bud from Hyannis, and that is what they're going to be proposing to their commission, I believe, next week as well.
That is a change, and I think you ought to explain the change and why.
Well, the change is that initially we were considering small packaged items to be processed through the terminal. We made the recommendation that no longer be permitted. Some of the primary reasons are congestion in the terminal, congestion on the frontage of the terminal, some security-related items that could take place there, as well as the enforcement and policing of that type of thing. The other is, from a customer service perspective, I believe it's better to have it in as few places or a single point where people can go to do their freight business as opposed to having multiple operations.
I think, from my perspective, the security issue is perhaps the most telling. The inability to track what comes in or goes out of the terminal as freight, and the risk to the traveling public if somebody were to try something that was not appropriate.
Yeah, I think the risks are much higher in the terminal than in a remote facility.
Any questions? So we are being asked to adopt these tonight?
Yes. And again, they were presented at a tenant meeting, they were forwarded to the users, and then followed up with a second request for input.
Any further questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve the revised minimum standards as,
Great, will there be an opportunity for public comment after this?
if you'd like to comment now, please go ahead. And please come to the microphone and identify yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Bonney. I'm the Senior Vice President of Planning for Cape Air, and worked very closely with you and your staff at the airport on setting up the cargo service when unexpectedly we were all forced into the business of setting one up. We very much appreciated the efforts on working together to turn that around in just a couple weeks. It's been about a year and a half since we've set up that building, the operation, and it's basically working pretty well operationally from our side. We understand that there are some issues with regard to security and customer service, and I want you to know that Cape Air is eager to address those along the way.
How specifically would you address the security issue?
Sure. So with regard to the security issue, I guess it depends on which piece of it that you're talking about. Security obviously is a broad subject.
If somebody brought a package in that could be detonated, for example, to be honest about it,
Sure.
You don't know what's in the package. You have no ability, and there's no requirement that it be screened.
Screen, sure. So a couple of thoughts on that. We have to look at the ways this has been solved in other modes of transportation, the way we operate the passenger side, the way that even if we did have a separate freight facility, this would be handled. So let's take those in order. A commuter customer today who's going to Hyannis, for example, where most of the freight goes back and forth, that customer has his or her checked luggage put on the airplane. We handle the packages the same way. And obviously, most of the freight comes this way, not the other way. So it's more an issue in Hyannis than here. So the level of screening is the same, whether it's
Basically
checked luggage-
non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do some behind-the-scenes work with the TSA through the computer systems, of course. But that is pari passu, passenger service to freight service. If we did have a separate freight facility, all that would happen is the packages would come in there, they'd get put on a dolly and brought over to the very same airplane. So it makes absolutely no difference, which facility they're at from a security standpoint.
Excuse me, may I?
Please.
I would disagree with that because of the risk of the number of individuals present in the terminal. The aircraft, I agree with, but in the terminal versus in a freight facility, I think there's a lot of individuals that may be at risk inside a terminal versus inside a building.
Okay.
So
Sure.
That's my own.
No, and I understand that. I guess the only counterpoint to that, and it's a great point, and look, safety, security, that's job one. For the airline, for the community. We totally get that. We're completely aligned in that. From a security standpoint, you can get into the terminal building, into the congested part, pull in a dolly, or even if there was a freight facility, you could still walk in with a package, any package, right? There's no screening to get into the building. So I'm not sure that washes either way. The secure part is when you go through TSA into the holder. But from the commuter side, it's exactly the same either way. Now, we are certainly open to ideas on security, ways that we can enhance what we do. That's absolutely something that we care passionately about and would be happy to work with you on. What we suggested back in January was one of the issues that we would like to see improved to enhance the community service that we're providing is getting some of the larger items that get shipped over out of the terminal. We see a possible safety issue there. I mean, happily, it hasn't been an actual issue, but when people are shipping over bumpers or other large objects, it's just kind of bulky taking those through the terminal. So we suggested, and would still love to have, some sort of cage or shed or something nearby so that we could take the bulky items and put them there. So we wouldn't have to bring those through the terminal. We would still love to do that. That's still on the table. And I want to be really clear. We love serving Nantucket. We like being in the freight market. It is a great addition to our Hyannis Nantucket business. Our concern is if we have to work with a third-party facility, that inevitably it's not going to be great customer service for us because we're going to have to move back and forth between the aircraft at the location where they currently park to move the material to the third-party facility. And then, of course, the economics of that become a challenge. The freight is a relatively small piece of what we do. And while we appreciate the outreach we've received from the third-party vendor, including some abatement on rates right from the get-go, we know eventually that ultimately they're going to need to make payroll and pay for their costs. So it's not going to be free forever. We know that that's going to be a real rate. Our concern is that our ability to provide the customers here on Nantucket what they expect will be significantly diminished. And the rates that we would have to charge to incorporate the new charges would make the service uneconomical. We are very respectful of the high-speed ferry. If you rewind the clock 15 years, the passenger market has moved significantly, and I'm really concerned that we will see the freight market do the same. It's been working for the... It has significantly. What we've been doing recently for the last year and a half since the closure of Cape and Islands Air Freight, it's actually worked reasonably well. It took some maturing on our end, and we learned some lessons along the way with help from you, and we thank you for that. I would hate to see the rates have to go up or the service change in any way, because what we're doing today seems to be working for the customers. If we did have to go to a third-party facility, unfortunately, after significant deliberation internally, we would withdraw from the air freight market. We don't want to do that. We would love to continue as we are. It's been working operationally for a year and a half. As it is today, it's an okay business for us. It enhances what we do between Hyannis and Nantucket. But if it were to get any more complicated or to have significant increased expenses, we couldn't do that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got them, but...
I think there is, anybody else have any questions? I think there is another issue from my perspective, which is the pickup by recipients of air freight here in front of the terminal, and the fact that their vehicles are unattended for some period of time while they run in or walk in or however they get in to pick up the freight. And that is an issue, and it's not something that should be happening at the airport. And so even if and there's some merit to your argument on some of the other security issues, but that's one that, you're not going to say everybody has to bring two people to the airport so they can come in and pick up their air freight. And from our perspective, particularly at peak times, not forget the congestion part of it. But just the fact that there are these vehicles that are out there unattended for some period of time.
You're talking about in front of the terminal?
Yes.
Are there ways to solve that with short-term parking in the adjacent lots?
You really think you're going to be able to get them to go into the short-term lot to pick up?
You would know far better than I.
Have they been doing it so far? I don't think so. And I haven't observed. I've seen them out there.
I've observed a lot not doing it, so.
Yeah.
Do we not have a police officer monitoring that?
As often as they can, but again, there's several hundred cars there sometimes.
Right. But I'm not talking about the parking lot, I'm talking about in front of the terminal. There can't be hundreds of cars in front of the terminal.
On a Saturday and Sunday, there's a good number of cars in front of that terminal building.
Mm-hmm.
And they have multi duties too. So they can't police it all the time.
And people don't believe in signs.
Well, I'm a believer in terms of security. If you have the mechanism to minimize your threat, that you should try to do that.
Thought. I think, I see a dilemma here. I don't want to see us lose Cape Air's freight service as well, but the underlying security, the difference that I see between the situation that you explained with passenger bags and the freight is that a freight package is somewhat left unattended. In other words, someone could not be part of what that might cause, for lack of a better, way of putting that. And again, not wanting to get too specific, but I can't help but think about, the marathon and the size of those packages. And that's the size of the package that we're talking about leaving. And in this day and age, I wish it wasn't true. I wish it all could stay the same. But in the world we live in, and I think that the underlying concern that I have is that somebody could do something like that.
Sir, if I may, we share your concern. As I said, safety and security is paramount. It's the price of entry in the airline business. Specifically with regard to what happened at the marathon, those items were carried in a backpack, which is just like what we would take for checked luggage, which also would then sit. When a customer, of course, checks in the bag, it just goes in the back hold room and sits on the cart, or it can be brought right into the terminal. It literally goes to the same place we hold the freight today. Literally the same.
But at least they have to have a ticket.
They do, but unlike an international flight, there is no domestic bag match, not even on the majors.
No, I understand that, but nonetheless, in order to check the bag, they have to have a ticket, which is some deterrent.
Sure, in order to send freight, they'd have to pay the freight charge too, which is, it's actually not that different. Just, I understand your point, sir. You make a good point, but this is not an airtight system.
No.
And we're all working together to come up with a good, safe solution.
But I think, well, I'm going to say what I say after we vote.
And I guess my only thing, and I assume it goes without saying, and from what I've heard, this is the recommendation of the manager
That is correct.
as drafted.
And if I may, also, one other, I don't know if I voiced this earlier or not, but one other concern that we had was policing and enforcing this. If in fact this were permitted, I don't know how we would spend staff time, effort to ensure that this, the size XYZ package goes through, or whether it's bigger or larger, or the weight. It would be very complicated and difficult to enforce, if you will.
Anything else?
I think I have to go with the manager's recommendation, personally.
Is there a motion to approve the minimum revision in the minimum standards?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Buscarin, are you there? Mr. Buscarin? I'm sorry? You're there? How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Aye.
Mrs. Topham?
I reluctantly vote aye. I will go to the manager's decision or recommendation.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thanks.
Mr. Bonney, I hope you don't think this is gratuitous, because we do appreciate what Cape Air has done to get into the freight service. And we are sorry to see somebody withdraw from service for the reason that, that because of a reason that we feel is necessary for the safety and security of the people who use the airport. But I would also say that having almost been bowled over by an automobile door coming from the Cape Air ticket counter through the terminal and out the door, there has been some, I won't say major concerns, but there have been concerns. And I would only hope that you would at least see whether the business was doable during the period of time when there is a total abatement, when they aren't going to charge. And then see if you can work with them for something that would work, rather than just saying, no, we're not going to even try, which is what the impression is we got from Ms. Markham's letter.
If I can just also, according to the memo, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Sir.
in terms of effective date, the way the proposed minimum standards are written is that this would take place if and when there's a facility that meets those minimum standards.
Right.
And they had indicated to work with, to be able to work with us on a transition if a facility does come online that does that, so.
Right, thank you.
So, Mr. Raff, that's a great point. Do you have a sense of when that is?
My understanding is it could be very soon, within a month or less. I don't know, but as soon as I find out, I'll let you.
Great, thanks. I mean, obviously, it's in everyone's interest. We have an orderly wind down.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonney.
Thank you very
You're welcome,
much.
Mr.
Thank
Straight.
you.
Thank you all.
All right, air service update.
On the air service front, and I just want the commission to know, too, that
Mr. Buscarin, if you're going to be yelling at somebody else, please mute your phone.
I apologize.
just as a side note, Andrew is also the chairman of a national organization, or committee that was put together, a working group by Congress for small community air service that was in your packet last month. That report was Andrew's working group, so. United service ends on August 14th, and we have heard rumblings that there's a possibility of jet service next season. They may be discontinuing the Dash operation, so we don't have it firm yet, but that's what we're hearing. Island Shuttle, we're still hearing that now things are getting very close. We heard indications that all paperwork's completed with FAA, and that there may be some new movement on that front. Allies has an airplane that apparently has been purchased and is in Nashua and going through conformity under an operator certificate, and I believe that would be for freight. There's a new company out there, or a new product called Fly Louie. The operator has started advertising flights in August from White Plains to Nantucket. NOAA has been in touch with them to ensure that they're going through the proper procedures and obtaining their business permits and so on. That's all I have for air service.
All right, any questions? Airport business plan.
I apologize, the computer died on us tonight. I had a brief PowerPoint put together for the business plan, which is in your packet, but essentially, as I presented previously to the commission, we utilized a template from the Airport Cooperative Research Program to prepare what we could. We've taken this fairly down the road, but we're at a point now where we just need to start getting some other organization or individuals involved. From the get-go, there are various alternatives as to how to prepare a business plan, and my initial determination was that we didn't have the money when I first started this to go out and get a consultant, so we thought it best to just start. And I also believe firmly that we have a lot of local expertise and knowledge, both on staff and local individuals. So we're trying to work with that on the cheap, if you will, with keeping in mind our budget. So again, it starts off with the mission statement. Well, the executive summary is the last part that gets written. So I just explained there what that would be about, the entire document. Then we go through the introduction, which has, you have the mission, vision, and values statement. The mission statement was copied right from what has been done in the master plan through their working groups. Vision statement and mission and values, rather, were prepared, again, internally through staff. And I'm presenting this as a very rough draft that's not complete. It's a work in progress, and I would like input from the commission. And as we get to the end, I would ask for your direction. I have a couple of next step suggestions. We then performed a SWOT analysis, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats. And in the document, you can see it's an outline like this that has the bullet points of each of those, and then it's followed up in the plan with an explanation of each, so that there's a clear understanding of what is mentioned by each of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And obviously, one of the big threats we all talk about is the ferry, and so that's identified there as well. We then go on and start to define refine and prioritize. And what that means is defining our goals and objectives. And as I mentioned, I think in the template version, we use what's called the SMART methodology for goals and objectives, ensuring that they're all specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Once we take the goals, and I will say we have not put them through this yet, but that's the criteria that will be used when we formulate and finalize these goals. We've just put some goals in here as some suggestions and samples. They have not been run through those filters. We then refine the goals and objectives using a GROW model, which identifies the goal. Is it a statement of desired result, et cetera? That it's reality, the options have been reviewed, and the will. Both. Is there a will to get this done? Is there political will? A number of those things. And then what we do is prioritize the goals using kind of a filter or sieve. And you can see the chart that's in there. It has low cost, high cost on the left side, and across the top, low benefit, high benefit. So for example, a high benefit, low cost would be a goal number 1. The goal number 2 would be low benefit, low cost. Goal 3 would be high benefit, high cost, and the lowest, number 4, would be a low benefit but high cost. So what we then would do is rank those accordingly. We have goal number 1, 2, 3, et cetera. And then putting the objectives for each of those goals through another layer, which would be the must do, the should do, and would like to do. And that way we start identifying exactly what objectives we need to get done. And then beyond that, you get into the action plan. And the action plan identifies the who, what, when, where, why, how, the resources available, and any notes. And again, we put in some, and I thank Janine for this. This is a very difficult thing, trying to organize all these levels. So there's an example in there of a goal with action plan 1-1-1, 1-1-2, and so on. So you can see each of the objectives that has been ranked by either must do, should do, or would like to do, and then it takes them into further detail. Beyond that, we have various forms that would be filled out. So we're at a point and a stage in this where we think we've done quite a bit of work in terms of the formatting and the structure of the business plan. Now comes the time when the rubber's going to meet the road, and we want to make sure that we're getting it right. The front end, the SWOT analysis, I think the mission, values, and goals, those types of things need to be finalized. I think we're pretty close on that. But now I need some thoughts, and I'd like to get input on next steps. So we're looking at how this document would be utilized once it's completed, and it will be a living, breathing document, so it's really never going to be complete. It'll be a continuous living document. But I would like to ask that the subcommittee, long-range planning subcommittee, be the point of contact for future reference here as the staff continues to develop these and put the goals and objectives through these filters. I'd also like to ask for consideration of any input on, what role the stakeholders of the airport play, whether it be tenants, users, whatever, and how they would interact and interface with this. So I just wanted to let you know where we are. It's you can see the front date says March 2016. Probably started well before that. But I think, as I mentioned in the template presentation, there's a very large benefit to having a business plan. It communicates to the staff the goals, the mission, and keeps them all on track so that when if they're faced with it to make a decision, they can at least think back, okay, this is part of what fits into what we're doing. So that's where we are, and just wanted to update you on that and request permission to work with the long-range planning subcommittee.
For starters, I would like to suggest that we all take a look at this and get our comments back to Mr. Raft, let's say in 2 weeks.
That's fine.
Is that reasonable to everybody?
Because what I see on this is that what we have to do is put a better image of us out there. That there's a couple comments about that we need PR, that people aren't speaking positively about the airport from the previous, and as we know, it's what had happened before. But
Which
so
was-
somehow we've got to get ourselves out there to say that we're not the bad guy anymore.
That was identified as one of the
Big threats.
threats, and
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
but we have not identified it as a goal yet, and that's a very good point. And some of the challenges we faced when we were starting to formulate some of these goals, do you simply come up with a generic, if you will, financial goal, or in that case, a marketing or PR goal, and then get into the specifics?
Right.
So we're kicking around ideas, but what we have done, the way we've approached this is with senior management. This has been prepared by the employees. This has been taken through and worked through with them. So again, I'm a firm believer, we have a lot of talent in-house. And I thank them for their input, because I think we're not doing a bad job for not being consultants.
No.
Well, I mean,
That's
I
very
think,
good.
I think you're doing a very good job, and I think the whole team is to be commended for, and I hope I speak for everybody when I say that.
Yes.
But I think one of the issues here is we've been on the defensive for the last 6 years. And we need to figure out a way to be more not offensive, but on the offensive in terms of our approach to the community and the whole public relations aspect of what we're all about here. And I think one of the issues that you identified somewhere in here was how we're looked at by the town. And we need to figure out a way to change that, and not change the structure, because we don't want to change the structure, but change the perception.
I believe, and some of this is still a little bit old, we have a very good working relationship, I think, now with town departments. So I think that has improved, and that could be modified in here. But we also want to continue and work with, the community, the town itself, the constituents and residents too,
Right.
so.
But I think, my perception is we're still a bit on the defensive with respect to the town, and there's no reason for that at this point. Even if FAA tells them they're not going to get all their money back, it's not a reason to be defensive. And so I think we need to sort of add that to our sort of to-do list in terms of how we approach that, it's hard to say it should be a marketing campaign. I'm not sure it should be a marketing campaign formally, but that's in effect what we're talking about.
Again, we can establish the goal and then the objectives that say how we're going to interface with them and on what level, and, to ensure
That's right.
that we are working professionally with them, so.
And we've got a lot of examples we can point to that say we have already.
Yeah, and they've done a great job. It's a two-way street. And a lot of interface with their different departments, so.
Okay. All right, so first off, if everybody would get their comments by, let's say, the end of the week after next, which is the
26,
So
maybe?
that's going to be 12
20.
days, 14 days,
No,
28?
it's, no, a little more than that, a little more than that. It would be the,
26 maybe, or?
It would be the 25th. Is that, all right, Mr. After? That work?
That would be great.
All right.
This is not happening at lightning speed, I apologize, but
All right, and my suggestion would be that you consider those suggestions, that you bring them back to the whole commission at the next meeting as you amalgamated them into the document. And if there's some ones that you feel shouldn't be there, I think that probably should be explained as well.
We'll modify the document with track changes so everybody can see
Right.
what, you know.
But in terms of things that might be raised by me or somebody that you think are totally nuts, that's fine. You should, but you just tell us.
No, and again, I'm a firm believer, throw it all out there and, you know, build a consensus on it and go from there, so.
All right. Then the next thing is your request, and I don't think it requires a motion if everybody is in agreement that the long-range planning committee be the working group of the commission to develop this further, once we've agreed on the sort of the parameters.
Yeah, because this, again, will be an ongoing, continuous work effort.
Is that all right with everybody?
Fine with me?
Makes sense.
Mr. Buscarin, okay? Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Anything else on that? All right, the Nobadeer Farm Cruise Quarters Development. Crew Quarters.
Formally ought to be considered crew quarters development, and that's the title we have been told to use. I've been informed that we are permitted to have up to 57 bedrooms on the site that we're looking at. The TJ Wooderson has developed draft floor plans with 14 units, some with 3 bedrooms, some with 2 bedrooms, some with single. I'm sorry, it's 14 3-bedroom units, 5 2-bedroom units, and 5 1-bedroom units, in a total of 12 buildings. And the first floor, it's a first floor layout with a basement below. So they're duplexes with a single floor and a basement. The site plan is also in your packet, which was developed by Leo from Blackwell Associates, indicating the 12 buildings. I had a meeting with the town housing coordinator to discuss our status as well as the status of their program, and looked for his input on this. Received his input, took it back, and received some other input back from the surveyor, and I think the layout that we have is probably very workable. Again, I want the commission to understand what I'm seeking tonight is concurrence with the conceptual site plan and floor plans so that we can take this to the FAA, put it in the land release request. This is not the formal site plan or drawings or anything for approvals or permits. The objective would be to obtain the FAA's approval and then have TJ and Leo work together to prepare a permit-ready package as well as an MEP or mechanical group, which would be McFarland Johnson. But tonight I would like to seek approval from the commission on the concept of this site plan as well as the units so that I can input this into the land release request to the FAA for their approval.
Comments, questions?
I like it. I like the, sort of what I had in mind and had made comments at earlier meetings about what I see as an economical nature, rectangles, not, jogs and
Yeah,
fancy. I like that, I think the dimensions that he used could lend themselves to either, modular, panelized, or stick construction. In other words, at 48 feet long, they're within the standard sort of production jigs if someone wanted to go, and 27 and a half wide.
I apologize, I should have mentioned that the original template that this was taken from was something that I believe he's working on at Sankaty Golf Course. So it's not something that's new. I think it is designed for modular, but it's also not going to be new to like an HDC or anything either. So it's the same basic concept.
I like it.
I like it too.
I like it too, but of course, I'm thinking, we're getting so many houses built and all. I'm sure we're gonna have a need for it, but It just seems like there's going to be some.
I think it's a concept, right?
Well, this is, yeah, that's a very good point, though. This is the concept for full build-out. We, or the commission, will elect to decide how we proceed, whether it's one building, two buildings, three buildings, whatever. And I think some of that is going to be driven by the financial analysis, which would be the next step to determine the viability of a project like this for a third-party developer. So again, this is just concept, but your point is very well taken. You know, we don't want to overbuild. It's a very tricky balancing act that we're going to have to perform there.
And would this be specifically for airport employees, or will it be open to other people, other
According
workers?
to, and I'll ask Commissioner Planzer to correct me if I'm wrong, but according to our discussions with FAA, it would be, the priority would be airport personnel responsible for emergencies, and then it would be able to support other police and fire personnel that would have to
Essentially
respond
first
to emergencies.
responders, right?
Anyone
Right.
responding to an emergency at the airport, yes. The way the argument was made that we put forth to Washington was that we have a very major problem with mutual aid. Our mutual aid is a minimum 4 hours away,
Right.
assuming
I agree.
everything works in order. And Washington agreed that that was not acceptable. So it would be for essential, and first responding emergency personnel, police, fire, and airport.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? The motion that's appropriate, I guess, is one which would approve this as a concept plan to be submitted to the FAA for approval?
Yes.
Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Further comment, questions, discussion? How do you vote, Mrs. Toppy?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Get cracking,
As the note says.
as the note says.
You slipped it there and sent out.
All right, the next item is an FAA grant award, Airport Improvement Project number 67, in the amount of $342,194, which is for the repaving of the north ramp and 500 feet of fence, right?
Correct.
I would make a motion to accept the drafted grant agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Again, this is what we approved earlier, based on the contract we approved earlier, based on the availability of financing. How do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right, thank you. Manager's report.
Okay, on the project side of the house, the vault replacement issue, you may recall we had an issue with the regulators not performing properly, the brand new ones. Kobo, ADB, who's the manufacturer of the regulators, Jacobs, and Johnny were on site today. ADB needed to do some further testing to attempt to come up with a resolution to what the issue is, so they were performing that today. On the interactive employee training, the Part 139 last module is being finalized. The system's been very useful in SITA training and driver training and has been working very well. On the FIDS PA system, the flight information display system, all screens have been installed. Jacobs was on site today and they established fiber connectivity between the FBO and the terminal. I checked before I came out here. The screens in the FBO are now functional. We have to modify some of the content. There's some repetitive issues I have to go in and take care of. The PA system is currently scheduled for September, October, and the interim solution was a suggestion made at the tenant meeting. We're going ahead and procuring a small PA type unit, portable type unit, to as an interim solution but it's also going to be something that we can use at other events as need be, so we're moving ahead with that. I also just want to make the commission aware that the capital projects requests for FY19 are required to be submitted to the town by August 21st, which is prior to your next commission meeting. So I'll be sending those out. I have a meeting with the town manager on September 6th. I will say that the theme or philosophy of this year's capital request is to minimize and only put in AIP-funded projects or those that are absolutely necessary. We're trying to get a better handle on our debt service and bring that in. We have a number of open projects that are out there still that have been appropriated for us. I want to get those closed out and off the books before we proceed with any other major expenditure from our own money. The ramp Phase 3 bids, we just approved that. Geometry issue has been assigned to McFarland Johnson. We received a grant for it, and now we're waiting for their schedule. The scoping has been developed for the ground service equipment storage facility, which will be constructed behind the ARC building. And McFarland Johnson will be on site Thursday with Fennick and McCready, their architectural subs, to look at the restaurant enclosure as well as the temporary hold room or structured awning that we've been talking about to improve the capacity in the hold room. The parking equipment has been installed and is operational. It's not fully functional yet. The enclosures have been, actually we received the enclosures today. They're to be installed, I believe, next week. At that time then, afterwards, the intercom and cameras, video cameras will be installed, and then full functionality can be had with regard to electronic chalking and enforcement. So I would estimate within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be going full force with the parking. Again, we're still going through some transition period for educating the customers.
What are you doing for that? I'm sorry.
We have it on the FID screens, we have social media, and more importantly, I think the better one is actually having people come in, use the system, and we're getting comments back both from them as well as the company and our employees. Some of the signs out there are too small. We're going to replace them with larger signs. We're putting a rate structure sign at the entrance of it. And one other item that Republic saw was, in their report, they saw a high utilization of the system for people who were parking less than 3 hours. And I tried it myself to just see what it did. And what it will do is it'll, say 0 to 3 hours free, but it will ask you if you want a receipt, and it'll give you a receipt for nothing. I said, there should be a way to program the system simply to tell people, first 3 hours free, no need for anything to move on. I used the system in another state, and it was on the weekend, and the message came up, weekend's free. So it just told me, okay, I'm done. So I suggested that we try to get the system programmed accordingly. But that's just one other way where people are coming in, we're getting some feedback, but we're not penalizing people yet. So, and I think they're picking up on things. It's working fairly well. It is a pretty intuitive system. Any other question on projects before I move to RFPs? As I mentioned before, the airport gas has been awarded, and they've been awarded the contract for the gas station. We'll now negotiate final terms of the agreement. Bunker Road parcels and Sun Island Road RFP is being finalized. I wanted to mention that what we discussed internally was that the criteria for those two different groups will be a little different. We will try to encourage development in the Bunker Road area of smaller, individualized type parcels, as opposed to Sun Island, where you will get higher credit for contiguous, larger type proposals. It just fits better, I think, with the layout. I would, and I think this may take a vote, Mr. Chairman, both parcels require a declaration of surplus property. The Sun Island one needs to be updated, and the Bunker Road would be a new declaration of surplus property. Does that require a vote? So
I think it probably should be separate, too.
Okay. If you want, I'll just finish the RFPs and then you can go on that.
Why don't you go ahead, yes.
Okay, we're also working on a request for proposals for hangar number 5, which is a wooden hangar that is attached to hangar 6. And as you recall, we're going to put it out as is with repairs required and an abatement. The World Fuel contract we're going to be working on in the fall. And the fuel farm lighting bids are due August 18th with a pre-bid meeting scheduled for August 14th. Do you want to take a vote on that before I go on to the operational side of things?
Yes. Is there a motion to declare the property at 10 Sun Island Road as surplus property?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? How do you vote, Mrs. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Gasparo, and the chair votes aye. And is there a motion to approve the updated declaration of surplus property for the lots on Bunker Road?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
How do you vote, Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, again, we can move forward.
Okay, on the operational side, fourth quarter financial report will be presented to the Board of Selectmen on August 23rd. We do not have it yet from the town. As soon as Jamie gets it and works with them to ensure that we're on the same page, I will send that out to the commissioners. I just didn't want you to be surprised, and I apologize for you not being able to see it before it goes to the Board of Selectmen publicly, but we'll get that out to you. There is a group, as I mentioned, I think at the previous meeting, of T-hangar tenants that are forming an organization, and they would like to present to the commission in September a proposed concept as to how they would be interested in taking over the operation of the T-hangars. The current tenant, Nantucket Aerodrome, their lease expires in November of 18. And Mrs. Boyle, who is the, owner of Nantucket Aerodrome, has also expressed interest in continuing that operation. She has had a 20-year lease with a 10-year extension, so a total of 30 years. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that in September, they would like to present to the board their thoughts.
Are they incorporating?
I don't know, Dan, what, I think there was talk possibly of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Nonprofit or LLC, I'm not sure. So I believe Steve Cheney is taking the lead on that. He would probably be the spokesperson.
All right.
Some dates to remember, again, the triennial exercise is September 13th. That's coming up, believe it or not.
Are we having another meeting before that final meeting?
Yes, there was supposed to be one scheduled. We had one, but it was canceled because of fog.
Right.
Some folks couldn't come in, so we'll get that back to you. Preston's back from vacation, we'll get that out. November 6th is the special town meeting, and annual town meeting is April 3rd, 2018. The timeline for the annual is in your packet at the end there. And if there's no questions, I would move on to statistics.
Go ahead.
Not great news. The operations are down 6% for the month, and year-to-date down 1.2. Enplanements are down 8.9 over last June and 10.4 year-to-date. It appears to be driven largely by significant drops in Delta and American service. NOAA will be performing a detailed analysis of some of this and getting us some other input as to what some of these drivers are. And in the Hyannis market, Cape Air and Nantucket Airlines are down, but if you add in the Retrix, there's a slight increase in the market. Cape Air enplanements total are down 4%. Delta was down 11%. JetBlue is up 1%. Nantucket Air down 42%. Tradewinds down 6%. American down 71%. And Retrix carried 897 enplanements on 185 operations. There appears to be some shifting in the markets. It looks like JetBlue is dominating and taking some of the American traffic from DCA. So there are some shifts occurring. As I mentioned, Noah will be performing a detailed analysis. And again, we have 1 month in the fiscal year, but right now it's a little disconcerting, and we want to look at that. In the Boston market, Cape Air employments are down 2%, JetBlue was up 3%. In the Washington National, JetBlue was up 32%, but American was down 72%. New Bedford, Cape Air was up 13%, or 60 passengers. Hyannis, Cape Air down 75, Nantucket Air down 42, and Rectrix carried in at 97. JFK, JetBlue was down 5%, Delta down 17%. LaGuardia, American's down 66% over last year, and Delta's up 57%. So there's some shifting in the LaGuardia market as well.
Is there a shuttle that's working people are using instead for New York? Because I was, when I saw that American Delta were down, I was wondering why, but I understand that it's
And that's
JetBlue.
not that I'm aware of. I mean, JetBlue's going to Kennedy, but you see LaGuardia is a shift of who's carrying.
Is there a boat that's coming from New York? that might
There
do
is,
some
but
of
it's
that?
Very small,
lengthy.
very
I
small.
just didn't know.
Yeah.
To lose that.
Also, Martha's Vineyard is down 28%, from 248 to 178 passengers. While that's very concerning, the fuel numbers are, we're really looking closer at those too, because the Jet A gallons, although for June they're up 4.1, almost 4.2%, and but for July they're down 4.45% for the month. Avgas for June was up 0.42%, and year-to-date up 9.2%, or 2.6, but for July, they were down 25.07%. So we're very concerned about the fuel and what's creating that. Freight for June, though, was up 14.62% over last year, and year-to-date down 16.2%. You can see in the detail that UPS continues with significant increases over last year, and FedEx is increasing somewhat as well. On the noise side of the house, there were 18 complaints versus 15 last year, and the details are in the packet. 13 complaints received from 4 residents regarding flights that were operating either under IFR conditions or an IFR flight plan. 3 complaints received from 3 residents from VFR aircraft operating outside the abatement corridors. Again, NOAA does a great job investigating these and getting in touch with the pilots as well as getting back to the community. And 1 complaint received regarding VFR aircraft operating within a noise abatement corridor, and another one received where there wasn't enough information. The follow-up, I think, is very good to understand. We provided 8 out of 8 cases, they were followed up, so where they requested follow-up, so 100% follow-up to that, and I give no credit for that. Any questions on statistics before I move on?
I do. I just have a request. I think it would be very interesting to see year-over-year comparisons of general aviation operations.
Operations?
Yes. Just, I don't think some of these others are really, maybe air taxi and
Yeah, we can break it
general
out.
aviation. Just to see maybe 5 years of history,
Okay.
see what it looks like. I mean, the air taxi's obviously going to take a hit from 2 years ago, but
Yeah.
I think it'd still be interesting.
Okay. I'm going to look to Noah again for that.
Sorry, Noah.
On personnel, we have made an offer to a candidate for the position of administrative assistant. Have you received? Okay, so we're waiting. Hopefully she'll accept that position. On seasonal employees, we're starting to see that some of the college students are returning back to school, but we have a small cadre of folks I've mentioned earlier that we have tapped into from Puerto Rico that are remaining through the end of the summer and some into October, so that's very good news. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. There, any questions? Moving on, are there any commissioners' comments?
No, my comment was going to be about the parking, but Mr. Raptor answered that, so.
Public comment at this time? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the public session, or to move into executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review executive session minutes as enumerated, under Clause 3, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property with respect to Matacashem Valley Road, also under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. And under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation related to the snow removal equipment snow blower. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the airport. Is there such a motion? Not to return to open session.
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Topham, how do you
Aye.
vote? Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Are you still there, Mr. Buscarin?
I am, but I cannot attend the executive session because I'm with other people here.
All right. Okay, thank you very much then for your attention, and we'll hopefully see you in person next time.
God willing, I'll be there in September.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you later, Tony. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I don't know, I kind of should have probably put that first on the agenda.
Oh,
What's that?
Unless you want to text him and tell him to dial in 15 minutes. So,
Who are we talking about?
David Jenkins is going to be dialing in to